أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين. So the fourth stage of Muawiyah's journey to becoming the first king in Islamic history is the Caliphate stage, and in this stage we'll discuss the treaty between Muawiyah and Imam Hassan alayhi salam, and we'll discuss the 10 years after the treaty, which eventually leads to his death. But in order for us to better understand the significance of this treaty and better understand how he became the caliph at the time, we have to just take a few quick steps backwards and kind of recap some of the important variables in this formula. So I want you to understand how Muawiyah's policies and politics worked, all right, and how devious he was. So we all know, all Muslims agree on how much of a good Muslim Imam Ali alayhi salam is. Not just a good Muslim, right? The greatest Muslim. But we all know that he is a very good Muslim. There's no debate about that. But if we go back in time, and we go to the year 4041 after Hijrah, and we are walking in the streets of Damascus, okay, and news comes to us, and we hear the breaking news that Ali ibn Abi Talib has been assassinated. Ali ibn Abi Talib has died. And we ask, how did he die? And we hear that he was killed while performing salah in the masjid of Kufa. Now, how did the people, the citizens under the rule of Muawiyah, how did they react to this breaking news that Ali ibn Abi Talib has been killed while performing prayer in the masjid? And the response and the reaction, which is very clear in the history books, is they reacted with a question mark. They said, and Ali used to pray? They were confused. How does Ali die in prayer? How is that even possible? They were under the assumption, they were under the understanding and belief that Ali doesn't even pray. So this gives us a sample of the types of propaganda and the extent of the propaganda Muawiyah's government was pushing and brainwashing the masses. That Ali ibn Abi Talib does not even pray. And they're so shocked of the news that Ali was killed in prayer. So you can imagine all of the other news and reports and rumors and fabrications that they were brainwashed and fed by Muawiyah's government regarding Imam Ali alayhi salam. Now we have to keep in mind, if somebody doesn't even know that Imam Ali prays, they're under the assumption that Imam Ali is an atheist and that Imam Ali doesn't even have a hand because the Prophet cut it off as a punishment for stealing. And we can go on and on with the fabrications that Muawiyah was feeding his people in regards to Imam Ali. This is their image of Imam Ali. Now imagine, what do they think? Well, have they been taught about the history of Islam? Because if you take Imam Ali out of the equation and he's no longer involved in all of those events and very important events in Islamic history during the life of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what kind of corrupt, what kind of distorted image and understanding do these innocent people have when it comes to what they were taught about Islamic history? What were they taught about the Sunnah of the Prophet, if this is what they're being taught about Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam? So this is very important to keep in mind. We have to keep this fresh in our mind, okay? So now, as we discussed, we know that he hates Imam Ali alayhi salam, and we know that he's been spreading lies about Imam Ali alayhi salam to his people and to his troops to convince them and persuade them to be loyal to him and support him fighting Imam Ali alayhi salam. And we know eventually he successfully causes, he's responsible for the assassination of Imam Ali alayhi salam, and he feels like he succeeded there. So now it's the perfect opportunity. He finally, in his eyes, he succeeded in this important milestone of finally, getting Imam Ali out of the equation, right? And Quraysh has worked so hard with him, and they've cooperated so well together to fight Imam Ali. And finally, they feel like they have achieved by finally killing Imam Ali after all of these years, right? In the year 40 or 41 after Hijrah. So now it's the next stage, the next chapter of Muawiyah's journey and of his story of finally reaching the top, okay, and finally reaching the goals and the aspirations and dreams that he has always desired for. And it's interesting when we say his aspirations and dreams. There's narration by Ibn Abi Shaybah and Musannif and also Tabarani. In his books, they all narrate that Muawiyah used to say that, I always had the desire for the caliphate. And then they add to it because Muawiyah claims that he once the Prophet told him that, oh Muawiyah, if you rule justly, rule in a good way. And ever since Muawiyah claims, according to these narrations, when I heard the Prophet tell me this, from that day I always had a very strong desire for the caliphate. So it's very well known that his goal is the caliphate. His goal is power and rule. He just wants to sit on the throne, no matter what methods he has to get there. It's not about religion. It's not about guidance. It's about sitting on the throne. And Imam Hassan alayhi salam is the disciple, and he is the inheritor. He is the Imam after Imam Ali alayhi salam. And we know that Imam Ali, Imam Hassan, Imam Hussein, and Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wa and all of the infallibles, their goal and their mission, their responsibility is guidance. It's not necessarily sitting on a throne and being considered the ruler or the political governor or the king or emperor or any of these titles. Their title and their responsibility is a leader of guidance. Okay, so now Imam Hassan has this responsibility of guiding the people. And we know that, there's been a problem with the Muslim nation ever since the passing of the Holy Prophet. And as I mentioned earlier about the Muslim conquest and the Muslim population drastically multiplying in size and quantity. So all of these new innocent Muslims, are not being taught the pure Islam of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wa which is the Quran and the Sunnah, the traditions and the practices of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wa They're being taught the Quran through the interpretation of Quraysh, either the caliphs or the governors. So these people need guidance. All of these Muslims and throughout the lands, they need guidance. And in the third chapter that we were talking about, in the time of Imam Ali's caliphate, we know that a portion of the Islamic territories had access to the guidance. They had access to the pure sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wa. But on the other hand, a huge chunk of land, which was under the rule of Muawiyah, they did not have access. They were blocked off from having access to the pure sunnah of the Prophet that came through Imam Ali alayhi salam. And as we gave an example, proof of this is when they heard news of Imam Ali being assassinated, the way they reacted. Because we know how Imam Ali's role was in all of, not just the battles, but all of these sensitive, important, significant events in the time of the Prophet, in the life of the Prophet. They removed Imam Ali. Just that by itself, they removed a huge chunk of the pure sunnah of the Prophet. Now imagine everything else. So all I'm trying to get here is conclude that the people under the rule of Muawiyah, they needed guidance. Okay? And Imam Ali's mission, which was to revive the sunnah of the Prophet, had to reach them. And the three wars didn't allow that to happen. It only strengthened Muawiyah's goal of preventing his people from mixing with the people that had access to Imam Ali alayhi salam. So now he approaches Imam Hassan, or he sends news to Imam Hassan that, look, let's come up with a deal. I stay under the land, under the rule of Sham in my territories, and you stay under control of your territories, and you don't interfere in my territories, and I don't interfere in your territories. So basically, let's have a truce. And these are the conditions: that I stay in charge of my people who've given allegiance to me, and you stay in charge of your people who've given allegiance to you. And at this point, the people of Sham had given allegiance to Muawiyah under the conditions that they had given allegiance to those before, the caliphs before, the caliph before, which is Uthman. Because when the Muslims gave allegiance to Uthman, they gave allegiance under three conditions: that he follows he acts based off the book of Allah and the sunnah of the Prophet, and the third, most important, is that he follows the policies, the seerah of the two sheikhs, Abu Bakr and Umar. Okay, and as we mentioned and as we spoke about the divide of Quraysh, is one of the main reasons they split from Uthman and became anti-Uthman is because this third criteria of following the seerah of the two sheikhs, he eventually, in some policies, he saw himself as an equal to the two sheikhs, as if now there's three, and that was enough to be punishable by death. But moving on, the people of Sham, they gave allegiance under these conditions, and this was something that Imam Ali was against, because if we go back in time to that year that Uthman was given allegiance, Abdurrahman bin Auf, he had first told Imam Ali that extend your hand so that I may pay allegiance to you under those three conditions. And the third one was the seerah of the two sheikhs. And Imam Ali refused, and this is very well known. He refused to accept allegiance under the condition that he follows the policies of the two sheikhs. So we know Imam Ali is against this, and Imam Hassan is also against this. But the problem here now is that thousands and hundreds of thousands of people have paid allegiance to Muawiyah under these conditions. And this is a continuation of this system of Islam, where it's really Allah and the two sheikhs. So what does Imam Hassan respond to Muawiyah? He gives him another deal. Because Imam Hassan, his goal is not to be the ruler or the caliph or the leader or the king or the governor. His responsibility and goal is to guide people and to make sure that he ensures the guidance reaches the people. If they want to accept it, they can accept it. And if they want to reject it, they can reject it. What's important is that they have access to it. So Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam, instead of allowing the Muslim nation to officially forever split into two independent nations, and eventually that can lead into a whole new religion. They already have almost another religion. Now officially, for generations and generations, it will become a whole new religion that is taught and guided by Bani Umayyah, which is a catastrophe. Imam Hassan wants to unite the nation to allow the people to freely, safely have access to each other and to speak in a safe environment, and allow the truth to spread, and to allow people to spread the hadith of the Prophet without any fear. So Imam Hassan alayhi salam gives him another option that, basically, Imam Hassan knows that Muawiyah's only goal, the only thing he really desires, is to be the ruler, the political ruler, and sit on the throne. So since Imam Hassan now has power, he has leverage, he has 100,000 troops at least, according to Ibn Zubayr, and I'll mention this soon. Imam Hassan has all this power, and now instead of going to a fourth war, they can now just have peace, and Imam Hassan will basically step down from the caliphate in the territories that he has, and Muawiyah can be the political ruler without getting involved into the matters of religion. So Muawiyah is, according to narrations, he's very excited about this. He's very happy, and he tells Imam Hassan to list off any conditions you desire, and I will fulfill them, and I will abide by them. And they agreed on conditions, and I go over this in the Tree of Imam Hassan course that we have with knowledge seekers, and we go in great depth, and we're going over all of the different opinions and the details. So right now we're not focusing on that. I just want to make it clear here that we're going to see a shift in Muawiyah's personality. We're going to see a shift in Muawiyah's policies. We're going to see a huge shift in how Imam Ali displays himself, displays to the public his view of Imam Ali alayhi salam. This is going to be a big change, and this is important in kind of seeing the transformation and the development of Muawiyah as a ruler, and on a timeline, seeing how he deals with things. This was a big shift. Because now for 10 years, during the time of this treaty, we see that Muawiyah is forced to abide by the conditions of the treaty. Okay, so he has to change how he talks about things and how he talks about Imam Ali alayhi salam and his policies towards Imam Ali and towards the Shia. So previously, he led this campaign and convinced the people that he is going to seek vengeance, for the killing of Uthman, and that the Shia of Ali are the ones who are responsible. But now that Imam Hassan has forced Muawiyah to abide by the conditions, we see a shift in how he deals with the Shia of Ali and how he deals with the legacy of Imam Ali alayhi salam. Now you might ask, what are some of the reasons why he was forced to abide by the conditions of the treaty? Why didn't he break the conditions? Or why did he even need to have a treaty in the first place? Why couldn't he just go to another war? So I want you just to take a pause, kind of zoom out, think of the map, okay? And think of Muawiyah's geographic location. Who is north of Muawiyah? Which empire? The Byzantine Empire, okay? And we know that Muawiyah, in the time of Uthman, which is not too long ago, he actually led a huge navy operation against the Byzantines in Constantinople, okay? And we know that the territory that he's sitting on, right, the Sham state and even North Africa, used to be the territories of the Byzantine Empire. And now, for the Byzantines, when they look at the Islamic empire or nation, they see 3 huge civil wars that just took place in about 4 years. And the Battle of Siffin, we said, was 70,000 deaths, not including the casualties, right? So for the Byzantines, this might be the only opportunity they have to reclaim the land of Sham, the state of Sham, those territories, reclaim it back to how it originally used to be under their control. So Muawiyah now, he's actually in danger, right? So he needs peace with Imam Hassan, because on one side, behind him is the Byzantines, and in front of him is Imam Hassan and the Kufan army, which I will mention in narration very shortly, of 100,000 soldiers loyal to Imam Hassan. So that's just one aspect to keep in mind. As for the details and the narrations and all of that, we get into extreme and extensive depth in the course of the Treaty of Imam Hassan, History 103. So if you're interested in more details and all the narrations and the views and everything, register for that course and you'll get a lot of information there. So now back to the treaty. So one of the things is now he can no longer curse Imam Ali. His government can no longer curse Imam Ali. And the Shia of Ali are safe, and not a single Shia is allowed to be touched. And we find that historically in those 10 years, from 41 to 51, or from 40 to 50, Muawiyah was not able to kill or torture or imprison or oppress a single Shi'i, a single follower of Imam Ali for 10 years. 10 years. Not a single Shi'i of Imam Ali was terrorized, oppressed, tortured, imprisoned, killed, any of those. Okay, not one. It wasn't until after that we'll get there. So these 10 years, Muawiyah put on this face that he actually loves Imam Ali, and he listens to poetry describing Imam Ali, and he even cries about Imam Ali, and he praises Imam Ali. And I'll explain some examples soon. So that's important to keep in mind, that now Muawiyah is officially the caliph of all the Islamic Ummah, but he has to abide by certain conditions when it comes to matters of religion, and he's actually very happy, and he's sitting on the throne, and the Muslim Ummah is in complete peace. There wasn't, like I'm mentioning, there's no more civil wars, right? It's complete peace, but in his mind, he thinks that he has now accomplished a huge milestone and a huge accomplishment and achievement, and now he got to what he wanted, and he thought that he had the upper hand. What he doesn't realize, and that he will shortly realize, is that Imam Hassan just now allowed the people of Kufa, the soldiers of Imam Ali and the Shia of Imam Ali, who have been trained and intellectually trained by Imam Ali, they are now going to intellectually invade the people of Sham. With the peace, they're going to spread, they're going to talk, and they're going to do business together. And now the Sunnah of the Prophet, of the virtues of Imam Ali alayhi salam, is going to reach the people of Sham. some of the virtues of Imam Ali alayhi salam and the Ahlul Bayt that we find in the books of authors who are known to have hatred towards Imam Ali and the Ahlul Bayt, we find that we can pull out and point at virtues, narrations that display the virtues of Imam Ali in those books. And it traces back to that period of time where the Shia were able to mix with the mainstream, with the public in a safe environment, and they were able to trade, and not only trade financially, but to also trade thoughts and ideas and narrations and knowledge. So that was a big benefit to the treaty, but it's also a huge harm for Muawiyah and his overall agenda. So, just some examples of the power of Imam Hassan and also the power of the Shia and how Muawiyah was forced is, there's an interesting narration but that describes and displays for us an interesting conversation about 3 years into this and 3 years into the treaty when Muawiyah performed his first Hajj. This is approximately in the year 44. He performs his first Hajj as the Khalifa, and afterwards he goes to the city of Medina, and he's there for 3 days. And on the third day, people are coming the first, second, and third day, and they're visiting him, and they're paying their respects to him, and he's the caliph and whatnot. So on the third day, while he's sitting down, and all these people are here visiting him, and next to him is Abdullah bin Zubair. And Abdullah bin Zubair is not considered one who loves Imam Ali or Imam Hassan, right? Not at all. And we'll discuss this in a later episode. But they have a conversation. Muawiyah looks over to him, and he tells him, is it not a surprise? I'm paraphrasing here. Is it not surprising to you that I've been here for 3 days and Hassan ibn Ali has not come to visit me? Basically out of respect, he hasn't shown me this respect that everybody else has, and he came to visit me. And Abdullah bin Zubair looks at him and he tells him, "Da'anka Hasana." Basically forget Al-Hassan in this topic. We all know that you and him are, basically acting civil with each other out of mujamala because you have no choice due to the treaty. For if Al-Hassan law sha'a Al-Hassan an yadribaka bi mi'at alif sayf lafa'al. For if Al-Hassan wanted to or desired to strike you with 100,000 swords, he could. And that the people of Iraq are more loyal to him and more attached to him than a newborn camel is to its mother. And this is a metaphor because it's known that a newborn camel follows its mother and is attached to his mother everywhere. So Muawiyah responds to him that, I'm going to visit my relative and I'm going to pay respects to him. And this is just an example of the strength of Imam Hassan and the civil relationship that they had. Okay, and this allows the people to mix. I'm just giving you an example. Another example of this, of how Muawiyah was kind of enforcing the treaty, the conditions of the treaty, was with his own governor Ziyad, who later on he calls, or he makes him his biological brother. So he's not talking to a stranger. And in this situation, this story, Ziyad ibn Abi or ibn Sumayyah, he attempts to be harsh to one of the Shia of Imam Ali in Basra, in the city of Basra. And he tries to arrest this Shi'i, and eventually, he doesn't succeed at it. But this Shi'i reports back to Imam Hassan, because according to the treaty, that the Shia of Ali are not to be touched or oppressed or affected or hurt or harmed by Muawiyah's forces. So Imam Hassan nicely sends a letter to Ziyad, and he tells him that, he reminds him of the treaty and that this is one of our Shia, so, I request that you leave him alone. I'm just paraphrasing. And Ziyad responds back in a very disgusting letter towards Imam Hassan, and he's very disrespectful, and he displays his hatred towards Imam Hassan and the Shia of Imam Hassan. So what does Imam Hassan do? He sends the letter, he forwards it to Muawiyah. Okay? And Muawiyah reads the letter and he becomes extremely angry at Ziyad. And he writes a letter to Ziyad immediately. And he tells Ziyad that I saw the exchange of the letters between you and Hassan. And then he warns him. He warns his own so-called brother to not dare get near any of the Shia under the treaty, that are protected under the treaty. And if he were to do so, he would not leave a place on the earth that is safe from Muawiyah's wrath. So he even threatens his own brother. Okay, this is also displaying how Muawiyah is abiding by the treaty, and he's publicly showing, care and protection towards the Shia. Now, another thing is that also one of the conditions is that the Shia of Imam Ali that fought against Muawiyah in Siffin and fought against Talha and Zubair and Aisha in Jamal, they receive an extra, let's say, salary from the government. Okay? So not only are they not oppressed, but they're actually receiving some privileges. And Muawiyah is abiding by this. So when he's in Medina, okay, and he passes by the house of Uthman, the third Khalifa, his cousin, his daughter Aisha knows that the entourage of Muawiyah is coming by, so she starts to mourn her father. And basically she has a conversation and she displays that she's very upset with Muawiyah for basically being a hypocrite. Oh, Muawiyah, you rose to power off of the propaganda campaign that you were going to seek vengeance for my father, and you were going to, kill the killers of my father who are the Shia of Ali. And now they're safe and they're protected, and you're actually paying them extra, and they're completely walking around freely in the lands. What? And you just completely ignored your mission statement. What happened? How could you? And Muawiyah nicely tells her that, look, basically he's telling her nicely that, look, I know my Shia and Hassan knows his Shia. Okay, and we made an agreement. I have to abide by it. And at the end of the day, if I was to break any of the conditions of the agreement of the treaty, they're going to rebel against me. And at that point, I don't know if the results will be with us or against us. So for you to remain being the daughter of the former Khalifa and the cousin of Amir al-Mu'mineen is much more desirable to me than you being some, basically a nobody in society, So that's how he quieted, he nicely closed the topic, and she's no longer a complaint. Now we find later on, Muawiyah, multiple reports of this where he welcomes the Shia of Ali who come from Kufa to his palace and to his majlis and in his court, and they would recite poetry where they would praise Imam Ali alayhi salam, and then in there they would also speak bad about Muawiyah and his father and mother, and they were protected. In his own face they would praise Imam Ali and they'd speak ill towards him, and he couldn't do anything about it. And on top of that, they would demand, a certain amount of money and camels and sheep and all of that to take back to the orphan children in Iraq whose fathers died fighting Muawiyah, and he would have to abide by it. And then one interesting conversation to his Zarqa, who is the sister of Hijr, and she was present in the Battle of Siffin, and she recited poetry against Muawiyah's forces, and they're having a conversation, and he remembers her from that day. And in the end of the conversation, he says, out of just amazement, he says, "Lawafa'akum." He says, "By Allah, your loyalty, you Shia, your loyalty to Ali after his death is more puzzling to me than your love for Ali during his life." Okay, so there's so many examples, but this is the gist of it. All right, and now after years of this, eventually things are not going in the way that Muawiyah wanted to. Too many people now are exposed to the truth that he's worked so hard to prevent. And not just him, Quraysh as a whole collectively worked so hard to prevent the masses from having access to the sunnah of the Prophet, especially in regards to Ali. And all of these new Muslims that they successfully brainwashed them, now it's starting to turn and people are starting to know the truth. So Muawiyah has to end this because now it's gone too far. So he successfully is able to convince the wife or make a deal with the wife, one of the wives of Imam Hassan alayhi salam, who her father was known for his loyalty towards Muawiyah's forces. And he promises her, wealth and marriage to his son Yazid, under the condition that she assassinates Imam Hassan. And they successfully assassinate Imam Hassan through poisoning. And now, in the year 50 or 51, that Imam Hassan alayhi salam has been martyred, we now enter a new stage in the rule of and the reign of Muawiyah, where now he's going to transition into a whole new monster. So now that Muawiyah has killed Imam Hassan alayhi salam, he takes things to a whole new level. And a new stage or side of Muawiyah has now become apparent and displaced. The villain aspect of Muawiyah, and being listed as one of the greatest villains of all time, one of the most evil people of all time, this is when it really comes out and is truly displayed to all people. Before this stage, there were still people who viewed Muawiyah as a good person, as a person with morals and principles, and actually had good intentions. But after this stage, and after he poisoned Imam Hassan, he broke every single treaty that he had given oath and promised to abide by, his true colors come to the surface. And now let's take a look at what this villain does, and the policies and the strategies and the methods that this villain named Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan practices on the Shia of Imam Ali alayhi salam. So the very first thing he does, Muawiyah is very clever. There are people in history, there are rulers and khulafa in history that were evil, but not all of them were clever and devious. And Muawiyah goes down in history as one of the most clever and devious rulers of all time. So let's kind of zoom in and analyze the steps that Muawiyah took to implement and to achieve his main goal, and how he implemented his policies. So he needs to get rid of the Shia of Ali, because the Shia of Ali to him represent the people who have knowledge, who have been trained and taught by Imam Ali alayhi salam. They have been taught the Islam that Muawiyah does not represent. And they have knowledge that was given to them by Ali ibn Abi Talib, who is the gate of the city of knowledge of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. The person that the Messenger of Allah taught 1,000 doors of knowledge, and each door opens up to another 1,000 doors of knowledge. So they pose as a true threat, because they pose as the people who are the preservers, those who they have attained and they are preserving the mission of Imam Ali alayhi salam. So Muawiyah needs to get rid of them. Okay, it's not enough to get rid of their leader. Then he needs to get rid of them also. So what does he do? The first thing he does is he now makes this man Ziyad ibn Ubayd al-Thaqafi, or Ziyad ibn Sumayya, or Ziyad ibn Abi, Ziyad, son of his father, because it is disputed on who his father was. This evil person, and he's very well known to being the father of Ubaydillah ibn Ziyad, and we'll talk about him later. He's the one who was involved in the time of the events leading to Karbala and after the tragedy of Karbala. So Ziyad, now what does Muawiyah do to not just buy his to truly buy his soul to a degree that that's never been conducted before? So Ziyad, he wasn't known as being the son of Abu Sufyan biologically. Okay, he was known to be the son of Sumayya or the son of Ubayd al-Thaqafi. But what Muawiyah does is he brings witnesses, okay? And in front of judges and in front of people, he has them testify that they saw and they know that Abu Sufyan performed zina with this lady, okay? And from this act of zina, Ziyad was born. And that biologically he is the son of Abu Sufyan, therefore making him a brother of Muawiyah. So now Muawiyah does this, even though this is publicly defying the sunnah of the Prophet. So the Prophet, it is well known that the Prophet had a sunnah and had a rule, and it was a very clear quote, that the child that it was born, even though there was zina that had taken place, he would legally be the son of whoever was the husband at the time, the legal husband, not who he might have been the biological son of through zina. But what Muawiyah did is now he publicly defied the sunnah of the Prophet. And there was pushback and there was resistance, but it wasn't enough. So now Ziyad is considered Ziyad ibn Abi Sufyan. And Muawiyah has him not only the governor of Basra, but also now he expands his territory and his rule to Iraq. So now this man Ziyad, who has now just become the brother of Muawiyah biologically, he is now the ruler of the most important. Now this is the most important territory, because these are the two two of the biggest military camps and fort capitals of the Islamic Empire. And now he is specifically in charge of the former capital of Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, and most of the residents there that were loyal to Imam Ali. And his job is to get rid of the Shia, to deal with the Shia of Ali. So the very first thing he does is he recruits special forces from a distant land from Khurasan, and these are Persian soldiers and let's say a special police force. And what he does is with certain excuses, he deports 50,000 warriors, Shi'i warriors that were warriors loyal to Imam Ali with their families. So 50,000 Shi'i families from Kufa and Basra to eastern Iran, to Khurasan. Then he replaces them with 50,000 Shami warriors that fought against Imam Ali with their families from Damascus, from Sham, to those empty homes in Iraq. And this is about 10 years before the tragedy of Karbala. So after that, he's not done. Then Muawiyah pushes his new policies. Okay, one of them was the cursing of Imam Ali on the manabir, on the pulpits, but also the preventing the law that it was illegal to spread and to narrate the virtues of Imam Ali and his household. So that's two separate aspects. Now, when it comes to the cursing of Imam Ali alayhi salam, this is where Muawiyah was also, not only did he do this throughout the entire lands, but this was also an excuse used to put the remaining Shia in Iraq in prison, and then those who were not put in prison to execute them publicly. So now we had mass executions, okay, after he emptied out 50,000 families and replaced them with 50,000 loyalists to Muawiyah. Now the remaining Shia of Iraq, we had two stages. One stage was sending thousands to prison, okay, and the next stage was public executions of Shia who refused to curse Imam Ali alayhi salam and to speak ill of Imam Ali alayhi salam. And of course, narrating a narration of Imam Ali was punishable by death, right? And it gets to the point, Al-Madaini narrates that there was not one known Shi'i in all of Iraq. So this is part of Muawiyah's accomplishments, right? His goal to destroy the mission of Imam Ali. He feels like he's getting near a goal that he desires. He's almost there, right? It gets to the point that Imam Ali's capital, Kufa, Iraq, not a single Shi'i is known in the public, okay? And this is years before the tragedy of Karbala. So what does Yazid do? So he deports the 50,000, he replaces them with 50,000 Shami families. Then we have the cursing of Imam Ali, the preventing of the narrations, the imprisonment of thousands of Shia, and the execution of the rest. We have many companions that were executed in this time. Hijr ibn Adi, Amr ibn Hamq al-Khuza'i, many Shia were famous Shia. Some of them were companions of the Prophet, were executed in very horrible ways in this time. So now I just want to look at, give you some examples of from mainstream Muslim books such as Sahih Muslim, and it's also mentioned in Bukhari. And also we'll look at an example from Sharh al-Nahj by Ibn Abi al-Haddad al-Mu'tazili. So first of all, Ibn Abi al-Haddad al-Mu'tazili, volume 11, page 54, he mentions in the events of the year 51 after Hijrah, which is after the death of, during the time of the death of Imam Hassan, he mentions the policy of Muawiyah, that Muawiyah had written a law that was sent to all of his governors throughout the Islamic land, that anybody who was to narrate a hadith of the virtue of Ali or his family was stripped of all rights as a citizen, okay? And it was a crime. Now, when you have no rights as a citizen, you also have no protection as a citizen. Okay, and it's a very, very dangerous situation to be in. But then we have an interesting example in Sahih Muslim in volume 4, Hadith 1871. He narrates a conversation, a dialogue between Muawiyah and Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas. Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas is a very important Qurashi figure. He was a military commander appointed by Umar to take out the Persian Empire. Okay. So Sa'ad is not a joke. He's not a weak person in the eyes of Quraysh. But Sa'ad refused to curse Imam Ali. So Muawiyah, he asks Sa'ad, what prevented you from cursing Ali, or in some narrations Abu Turab? Okay, and Sa'ad responds with a long response, and he tells him that I witnessed these three virtues that were given to Ali ibn Abi Talib by the Messenger of Allah. I was there, I saw and I heard them. And he goes on to mention the details of it. And one of them was Hadith al-Manzila, where the Prophet told Imam Ali in front of Quraysh that, "Oh Ali, your status to me is that of Aaron to Moses, except for there is no prophet after me." And he also goes on to mention the verse of Mubahala, and how the Prophet put Imam Ali as an equal to the self of the Prophet. Right? In different narrations mention different virtues, but he lists off three virtues of Imam Ali that he witnessed, and he, from that point, he said, I can't, even though he was not on Imam Ali's team, but he couldn't get himself to the point where he can curse Imam Ali publicly. And we have in some narrations that Muawiyah was very angered by Sa'ad for, actually in the very early stages of all of this, for protesting Muawiyah from cursing Imam Ali on the pulpit, where Sa'ad threatened Muawiyah that I'm going to leave the masjid and I'm not going to return and sign a protest if you're going to curse Imam Ali on the pulpit. And it's according to some historians that analyze and studied this event, it seems as if Muawiyah actually poisoned Sa'ad to get rid of him, because he was protesting this fact and he was considered to be one of the important members of Quraysh. So now here's an interesting story I want to explain, and this is from Kitab Sulaym. And we have other narrations, many more of conversations on this topic, but I would like to mention this one. And it's in volume 2, page 287. And here it describes this dialogue that takes place between Muawiyah and Ibn Abbas, Abdullah ibn Abbas. And what happens is Muawiyah is walking, and he passes by a gathering of the members of Quraysh, people from Quraysh, and amongst them is Ibn Abbas. And out of respect, everybody stands up for Muawiyah except for Ibn Abbas, who's displaying that he does not approve of Muawiyah's actions. And here, Muawiyah tells Ibn Abbas, because apparently Ibn Abbas has been narrating virtues of Imam Ali, and that's against the law. So Muawiyah tells him that we have made, I'm paraphrasing, but did you not hear the news that we have sent out the news to all of the states and all the cities that it is illegal. It is illegal to narrate, it is forbidden and prohibited to narrate the virtues of Ali and his household. So hold your tongue, O Ibn Abbas. So then Ibn Abbas tells him, he says, so do you also prevent us from reciting the Holy Quran? Muawiyah says, no, I don't prevent you from reciting the Holy Quran. So then Ibn Abbas takes it a step further and asks him, do you also prevent us from the ta'weed and the explanation, interpretation of the Quran? And Muawiyah says, yes, I prevent you from performing ta'weed of the Holy Quran. So then Ibn Abbas tells him, so you want us to recite the Holy Quran and not ask what Allah meant by the verses? Muawiyah says, yes, that's what I want. I want you to read the Holy Quran, but I don't want you to ask questions. Okay. So then Ibn Abbas tells him, so how are we supposed to know what is wajib on us to perform? How are we supposed to know what God wants from us? Right? Because we can't ask about the verses. So then Muawiyah tells him, because Ibn Abbas cornered him publicly, right? So Muawiyah responds to him and tells him, okay, you ask about the ta'weed of the verses, but from other than your household, other than your family, O Ibn Abbas. And Ibn Abbas responds, basically saying, subhanallah, the Holy Quran was revealed, it came down in our house, our family's house, or did it come down in the house of the family of Abu Sufyan? So from there, Muawiyah tells him, okay, recite the Quran, okay, but do not narrate what the verses of the Quran that were revealed in virtue of the Ahlul Bayt. Leave that out. You can narrate anything else. You can talk about the ta'wil of anything else, but not about the verses that highlight and display the virtue of the Ahlul Bayt. And then Ibn Abbas, he responds back with the verse in the Quran, they desire to put out the light of Allah with their mouths, and Allah will not consent save to perfect His light through the unbelievers, though the unbelievers are averse. Here, Muawiyah is like, okay, there's nothing else I can do. Muawiyah says, oh, Ibn Abbas, hold back your tongue from me. Just leave me alone, okay? Just stop talking about me. If you really, really have to narrate the virtues of Ali, do it in secret. Don't do it publicly. Don't let anybody hear you. And it seems like this is the only person that was given, an exemption from this rule of Muawiyah about cursing Imam Ali and the prevention of narrations. But it's not, we don't stop there. Muawiyah did not stop there. It wasn't just preventing the narrations about Imam Ali's virtues. It wasn't just cursing Imam Ali publicly. He was highly involved in the operation of fabricating narrations and distorting narrations.